All right, seventh gear over Rev fans, have we got a guest for you on this week's show? This guy, I'm fortunate enough to call him a friend. We've worked together. This guy may be possibly the worst kept secret in all of motorsports. This guy's been around for seemingly forever, even though you may or may not have heard of this guy, but he is his success just follows this guy. Every once in a while, I get to spend some time with him at a racetrack when we're coaching together, doing an AMG Academy or something like that. But I mean, this guy is a current Trans Am race winner. He is tied for the series points lead in the TA2 category. He also finished P2 at this year's 24 Hours of Le Mans. One of the busiest guys I know. I'm grateful that he was able to carve out a little bit of time for us on this week's show. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome my good friend of the show, Mr. Thomas Merrill. Thomas, how are you, buddy?
I'm great, Kevin. Thanks for having me on the show. I've been looking forward to this a lot, and you're embarrassing me with that intro. It's it feels good hearing you say that, but
It's kind of like your dad talking about you, and you're like, "Dad, shut up, stop it."
Yeah, yeah, but
It's what we do.
Yeah, but it's thank you for saying all those nice things. I appreciate it.
Well, dude, you have certainly earned them. I mean, just obviously, I know you some, from having worked with you here over the last several years, but it's like, looking back on your history, man, you started really young, right? You started out in karts like a lot of guys, went into formula cars like I did and a lot of other guys did. But let's just kind of set the table for the seventh gear over F fans that may not know of the growing legend that is Thomas Merrill, and kind of give us a little bit of background about how it started, where it started, how you got to where you are today, and then we'll get into some more specifics about your Trans Am gig and this year's Le Mans.
Well, yeah, like you said, it's been a long road, and my career really wasn't a career at the beginning. My family was really into karting. My parents actually were Porsche Club racers when I was a child, and that all stopped when we got the go-karts, and that quickly took over the family hobby thing on the weekends. But my dad was an interesting influence in my early karting career. When the other kids were playing on their scooters and the other dads were working on the go-kart, he pulled me aside and said, "No, you're going to work on your own stuff. You're going to make this hobby, you're going to own this. If you're going to do it, then you're going to put in the work for it." And that continued through my whole karting career, where I became sort of the driving force with our family. But my dad was always about also having fun doing it. And so we never really pushed too hard to be at too high of a level in karting. So I never really knew what I wanted to do or how I could get to the next level. And I ended up seeing an ad on the internet one day for Ron Sutton's Winner's Circle driver development program, which is based out of Sacramento in California. And just on a wing and a prayer, I sent in a resume that had almost nothing on it. He selected me as the wild card choice. There was about 20 of us that went to Altamont Speedway in Tracy, California, and got in a Ford Focus midget, and which I've never seen an oval before. I didn't even know what a midget was, and just got in the thing and did what they told me and just drove the crap out of it, and managed to make the program, and then it all kind of sprouted from there. So I owe a lot of my early career to Ron, because it's a funny old sport, this one, right? There's no draft, there's no collegiate program,
right.
there's no guidebook that shows, okay, you want to be a pro, here's exactly how you go do that. There really isn't that. So everyone has to stumble their way into it in their own way. But Ron was very influential in terms of just giving me a direction and getting me started. And Champ Car and open wheel was always where my heart was. So my early career was in the open wheel stuff, and right when Champ Car went away and the merger happened was right when I transitioned to sports car racing. The team I was racing with had an Atlantic program, and they switched to the Rolex Sports Car Series in a GT car with so it was PR1 Motorsports, Bobby Orgel out of Fresno, California. And
Yep.
I got to continue that path with them and dip my toe in the sports car world, and been doing that ever since. And I had a bit of a lull in my career after the 2008, 2009 period of time, where I wasn't really racing much. I was finding other jobs in the industry, doing a lot of other things. And then years later, I met Richard Deal, who became my Trans Am car owner and got me back into the sport from a driving perspective.
Big deal.
Exactly. Yeah. Big deal racing was what we did. And we went out, we won the West Coast Championship in 2018, and then stepped up to the national championship in 2019. And that's kind of what has led to where I am now. So I owe a lot of my career resurgence to Trans Am and the growth of the TA2 category.
Well, holy shit, dude. I didn't know that you ran a midget, even if it was just for a brief period of time, but that's awesome. I mean, that
Yeah.
also adds to your whole skill set in terms of, what you're feeling, when you're out on the racetrack. But, to your point where you had that lull in your career in 08, 09, that was also the recession right then. Cause I mean, I got fucked over in that whole deal too. Cause I was supposed to, we were a day away from flying out to Phoenix to buy an Indy Lights team. And that, it was the day before the market crashed. So I feel you, brother. I feel you on that in a big way. So, but man, you had massive success early on, despite the fact that your dad was like, okay, you're working on your own shit and we're going to have fun while we do it. But you were winning championships straight away. You were successful straight away, almost in your Formula car stuff. I think you were like rookie of the year and you won some races and stuff in F2000s. I mean, so at what point were you like, okay, we got a little something to us here. We might be able to just see where this can go because we got some stuff, right?
It's interesting you say that because from a career standpoint, my parents were again I was the throttle and they were the brakes in a lot of ways. So that second year of Formula car racing, they were sort of reserved as far as their support went, and so I had a bunch of savings that I put into my racing early on. The Van Diemen RF05 race car that I raced in 2007 was the first car I ever bought with my own money, which was kind of neat. And but to your point about when did the light bulb go off? My parents were like, "Hey, we'll support you if you prove to us that you can do this successfully. We're not going to let you chase a dream or anything. If you really want to do this, then prove to us that you can make it." And so first race in 2007, we went down to Fontana for the first race, and I put the car on pole by a half second and led most of the race until we had a mechanical failure. And I remember my mom talking about seeing me out in front and going, okay, that was kind of the light bulb for me and for the family. Going, okay, let's pursue this. I think there's something here. But until then, it wasn't really clear. So yeah, I credit my parents for not necessarily just giving me blind support, but making me earn it in sort of every way from the beginning.
Well, I guess it doesn't hurt to have somebody who's a little more pragmatic and the voice of reason there when we're trying to go full throttle in every part of our life at that stage of the game, right?
So
Yeah,
it's also good
totally.
too in that aspect too, because how many stories have we heard where somebody like yourself who's younger getting into everything, and you have some folks out there who are predators in the world of collecting up young drivers and then using them to their advantage and then screwing them over later in life. You had your parents as that barrier saying, "Hey, we get it. You want to do this, but let's be real." Is what they say. Is how they handled it.
Totally. Yeah. I come from a farming family. My younger brother is now fourth generation in the family business, growing vegetables in the Salinas Valley. And so they've been successful on being careful and making calculated bets, right? That's all farming is really, with, planning for the weather and everything else. And so they took a very business-like approach to, how they supported me, and as frustrating as it was, to be honest. I mean, obviously you want, you look at the other kids down the grid and they've got, all the support in the world, and I'm there paying my own way through it. So that early bit was frustrating, but looking back on it, it was the best thing for me.
Isn't that funny how those early lessons that are frustrating for you and the ones that you hate the most wind up coming back years later to be some of the biggest, best lessons you could have ever gotten, that sets you up not just for your career choice, but your life in general?
Yeah.
It blows my mind. So, okay, a couple of things that kind of sparked a thought from what you just said, Thomas. So you said your younger brother is fourth generation farming there in the Salinas Valley. How many siblings have you got?
Just the one.
So what you're saying is that you're the one that slipped past the goalie and got out the door before they could shut the barn door on the horses getting out of the gate. So so you ruined it basically for your younger brother. He's got to deal with the family legacy in the business. I'm joking. So,
but to have a family business like that and to have them allow me to not continue in that role was fortunate as well. But that kind of goes with the same, they weren't hypocritical in that way. They were fine supporting me in whatever I wanted to do as long as I could do it successfully. So, whether that was farming or accounting or race car driving, as long as I could do it, they were supportive. So yeah, very fortunate to be in that position. And I wouldn't blame my brother if he had an axe to grind for me leaving him the keys to the the castle there to carry up the mantle. But he's doing a great job with it, and he loves it. And yeah, I learned very early on in working for the family business that farming wasn't for me. I'm just not patient enough to watch stuff grow. When I worked for the family business, I worked in the maintenance shop, welding and fixing tractors and stuff, and that's kind of where my heart was.
Oh, and I can imagine too, given the current climate and all the water issues there in California, that's probably got a little increased stress level, with the family, trying to deal with all of those factors that go into that family business. But
without a doubt, yeah, farming is not easy, and it takes a lot of work. It's a lot of man hours, and my dad always says, the plants never sleep, so you have to always be on top of it, and to their credit, they do a really good job.
And little do we know, your younger brother's probably out there plowing, 40 acres in half the time that it would take a normal farmer, because,
Right, exactly.
he's got that latent race car driver thing going on. It's like, my brother can do it, then so can I.
See a number on the side of the tractor all of a sudden, like,
yeah, right.
Seriously. And so like, he'll have the little light bright thing on the side of the tractor window at like midnight at night, trying to, so the timing and scoring can recognize them as they go by.
He's in first place, everybody. Look, the one light's on.
So when you bought that RF-05 and you bought it out of your own money, did you run it yourself too, or did you have somebody prepping it and doing all that stuff for you? Or was it just basically the one-man show where you had to do it because you'd spent all your money on it and you were trying to prove to your family that you could do it? How did that all play out?
That was, I was fortunate enough to be with Bobby Orville's group at that point, and to have a good team around me. And that was one of the first lessons I learned from Ron Sutton and Bobby, was the value of good support and being with the right people. And the funny thing about my early career is I didn't start till I was 19, which sounds young to most people, but my teammates were 16. So I kind of felt like I was under the gun to produce results and get going. This was right in the same period of time when Joey Logano and Lewis Hamilton were starting their careers as well. So there was this new fad in the racing world where, hey, you got to be 14, otherwise we're not looking at you. You're too old. So here I am, 19 years old, going, shoot, I better get down to business here and get some results. So I had the luxury of being with a proper team and having a great teammate, Patrick Barrett, who's one of the best drivers I've ever seen. And unfortunately, he never pursued his career farther. But he and I were, by the third race of the season, we were a second clear of the field because we were comparing data and comparing notes and making each other better and pushing each other forward and getting some good results there. But yeah, having that first lesson of having the right team behind you was clear very early on.
Well, as you say that, Thomas, I have to say, as much as I love you, brother, I also hate you, because now you've also just pointed out exactly how old I am, because I didn't start till I was 22, and I actually raced against Bobby Orville back in the day.
Oh, so, nice. That's
so
awesome.
Fuck you for that. Thank you very much.
No, I deserve it. Yeah, I understand.
But so, dude, okay.
I'm saying that same thing to the kid. So I just got beat at the last Trans Am race by a 14-year-old. So I identify exactly with what you're feeling right now, because
right, and you're a whole lot younger than me, but man, and we're going to get into that, because I cannot believe the age of some of these kids that are coming into the Trans Am series now, especially in TA2.
Yeah, it's wild.
But holy shit, dude. Yeah. And so good. At least I'm glad you can sympathize with me here on not feeling that old, but realizing you're like twice the age of these kids you're racing against. Yeah. So, all right. So you had a little bit of your kind of lull there in 08 and so forth, but then the Trans Am thing started to kick off, right? You got a little bit of a taste of that. And we'll talk about LeMans separately, but you've been in what, 8, 10 LeMans 24 hours now, right? Did I read that right? 12?
One.
Oh, I thought I saw somewhere that you had been in like 8 of them, and I'm like, how did I not know this?
No, I had never been to France before this year.
Okay. All right. So let's save that. Let's get into the Trans Am stuff. So that kicked off when you started working with Mr. Deal, right?
Yes.
So what attracted you to Trans Am? Is it was that kind of the direction you wanted to go, or was it just a great offer and it seemed like it made the most sense financially and it was a great way to kind of get back on the map? How did that whole thing play out?
it's a mix of everything. Richard and I became friends and met at the racetrack and developed a relationship. And he decided he wanted to help me with a career resurgence. He's like, hey, I'd love to see you get back behind the wheel and we'll see what you can do. And then the question was, well, where do we race? And the TA2 category is not anymore, but at the time it was the best kept secret in motorsports. It's such a budget friendly series. And it really fit the bill for what he was able to do and where I wanted to be and the style of racing that I wanted to do. And it also had a smaller West Coast series that allowed us to get our feet wet without, diving in with both feet and kind of overcommitting. We could feel it out and see what we liked, what we didn't like. And so it was the right mix for us. And I could tell that Trans Am was on the rise. It was clear that it was a good formula. It was a good package. The field sizes were growing. The budget of the series, the running costs, everything was reasonable. So it was favorable, but they just weren't marketed terribly well at the time. So not a lot of people were super aware of it or nearly as aware of it as they are now. And I'm happy to say I was right. Yeah, ever since then, the series has grown and grown and grown and become bigger. And it was definitely the right. It ticked all the boxes for us, for Richard, and Richard was not only my car owner but my teammate. He got himself a car as well, and we raced together and we kind of learned together, and that was really cool to be able to do that together. And it's a great category not only for the professional driver but for the amateur. And it's the last car at that level that's totally analog in the professional world. Everything else that you would race now has ABS and TC and all these buttons and switches and dials. And I'm very old school in what I'm drawn to racing about. And I enjoy that it's an H pattern shift lever. I enjoy that there's no ABS and there's no traction control and there's nothing other than the driver there to make the car go fast.
Exactly.
I was gonna actually ask, because obviously we talked about LeMans. Obviously, we get to that second. Between driving the Trans Am car and something like the WeatherTech Porsche, how does that feel? How do you describe the difference in those cars? Obviously you said they're very analog, but covering the discipline of both vehicles, how does that change your mindset when you get into one into the other?
That's a great question. It's culture shock. It really is. And the benefit of for me, I always feel it's easier to get in a new car I don't expect when the environment is so different, and you can just hit the mental reset button and go, okay, everything's different. Let me just start at zero and take things at face value and learn how to make this car go fast. The cool thing about the RSR at Le Mans is it also did not have ABS. So it allowed for a certain amount of dexterity and feel and technique involved in managing the brake pedal, which at Le Mans is super important because of all the big brake zones and the fact that we're running as little aero as possible. So the car tends to be a little bit nervous and it requires you to feel the brakes really well. So in that regard, the TA2 car and the RSR were very similar in that you really had to, you couldn't just mash the brake pedal like you can in a lot of other modern race cars. Everything else about it's totally different. The aero behavior, the tires, the way the traction control works and all of that stuff. And I mean, dude, they sent me a 20-page PDF on how to use the steering wheel in the RSR.
Oh my God.
And I have one button on the steering wheel of my Trans Am car, and that's the radio.
Yeah.
That sums up the difference right there.
See, and that's what I love about the Trans Am series. I mean, to your point, to an extent, I mean, it still is sort of like the best bang for the buck from a budget standpoint. But it was even more so, like you said, now that it's not really the best kept secret, it was kind of on the rise. And for those of you seventh year over fans that are not aware, the Trans Am series was the shit in a couple of iterations. I mean, all the way back to the late 60s and early 70s when you had guys like Falmer and Posey and Donahue and all those guys that came out of that, and they were racing everything. And then it kind of had another resurgence, in the mid to late 80s, when there was that whole thing going on, and then it kind of fell off the map a little bit. But now over the last few years, to Thomas's point, I mean, it's getting huge. You've got, I think, CBS TV coverage, right, for those races. You've got 36 car fields in TA2 alone.
That's a small turnout for us. We've had as many as 50 this year.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
And I know some of the officials are like scratching their heads going, how do we deal with what like 50 cars at Laguna Seca and qualifying and trying to let guys get clean laps so they can run the whole deal. So is that kind of, I mean, obviously you're right at the sharp end of the stick in terms of the points right now. You're neck and neck with Rafa Matos, former open wheel guy as well. So how do you see these well, you got 3 races left. I think Nashville's the next one next weekend, and you got Watkins Glen and VIR, maybe, I think, something like that. How
Yeah.
do you see this the rest of the season playing out for you, man?
We got the momentum behind us, dude. We had a rough start to the season. My entire team got COVID right after PRI. And at the end of last season, we sold a lot of our fleet off, and their plan was to build a bunch of new cars over the winter. And so, you can probably do the math. We didn't do a lot of preseason testing before Sebring, and our first race of the season is in February. So literally, we showed up to the first race not having turned a single wheel of testing all winter long, and the series just keeps getting more and more competitive. So we were up against people that were really, really well prepared. I went out for the first session and the engine broke. We had to actually bring in a spare car for me to race that weekend. The second race, we had a bunch of mechanical failures. At Laguna, we had a mechanical failure on the engine side. So we had a rough start to the season. And I put that down to just a lack of being able to prep the way that we wanted to. But we basically used what we had. We took each race one at a time. We built our progress as well as we could, used the components that we had. And, our results this year have shown that every race that we haven't had the car break, we've been on the podium, and our results have gotten better and better all year and culminated in winning 2 races in a row. And now, sharing the points lead. So I don't see this year going any different than it has up until now. I think we're going to keep progressing and moving forward and getting more and more competitive as we get to the final race of the year at COTA in November. But there's a lot of racing left to go, and there's a lot that can happen. Nashville's a street course. There's a lot of drama potential there. And that can make or break your season if you don't finish an important race like that. So we're staying focused. We're doing the same thing we've done all season long. Take it one at a time and worry about what we're doing. Make sure our car stays in one piece, and just keep pushing.
I think I should probably have invested in like the spare bodywork panel business for Nashville, knowing that it's that straight circuit, because that could be wow.
Those Trans Am cars aren't exactly small, so yeah.
No, it's going to be really interesting. I was really impressed with the event last year. I think they did a nice job being, for a debut event, the way it was organized and put together. Scott Borchetta, who was the main organizer of that and also races with us in TA2, I think played a big role in making sure that things happened the way they needed to. But it was rough around the edges. The track was really narrow in some places. There were crazy bumps. My heels were bruised at the end of the first day last year at Nashville because of how bumpy the track was coming off the bridge down to that big break zone. Wow. And I understand they've done some repaving. They've opened up some of the corner radiuses. But I'm interested to see about that, because there's actually one section on the back where on the other side of the bridge where we make that loop and come back around, where they just paved somebody's driveway to connect 2 roads together to make the racetrack. And it was like Macau. I mean, you could not fit 2 cars through there if you wanted to.
Wow.
And I kind of hope that's the same this year, to be honest with you, because I think it was kind of cool. But I'm interested to see what track changes they've made and what improvements are there. Because I actually found the track pretty raceable and pretty fun to drive.
No, I think it's poised to be another stellar event. But as you're talking about that, Thomas, I'm thinking, when you were talking about how you really, didn't get any chance to do any preseason testing because of the crew with COVID, they weren't able to build the new cars after they sold the old ones off. Because I don't know specifically, but what are you allowed in terms of testing both preseason and in season for the Trans Am series?
Pretty much whatever you want to do. You can't test at the venue you're racing at within 7 days of that race. But other than that, you can test as much as you want. But it's interesting you say that, because right now nobody can get tires, which is kind of industry wide. People are struggling for tires. And right now we couldn't test if we wanted to, because the only tires we can get are at the race weekend. And Pirelli is limiting us to 2 sets. And that's it per car. That's all we get. Man. And so we had a test on the books for late in the year that we had to cancel because we just can't, there's no tires. So the tire shortage is taking care of any testing issues that might be there from one team to the next.
In a weird way, it's leveling the playing field in a certain
totally.
way.
I was just thinking about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't originally because there were the teams that stockpile tires. You know, there's always those guys that buy as many tires as they can and have them on hand. But I think those resources have been depleted at this point, and now I think everyone's kind of on an even playing field. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds like that's the kind of the typical SCCA pro racing, testing rule, where it's like you can't test at the venue you're going to within 7 days, but 10 days or 2 weeks ahead of time, you can do a track day event there and take your car out there and basically use it as a test session if you needed to. So
yeah. Although we have so many races on the calendar, I can't imagine, a lot of people are able to test that much anyway, because we're constantly on the road going from one place to the next. And it's not easy. It's a tough schedule we have. We've got 12 rounds and it's really impacted in the summer months. I mean, we had 3 back-to-backs this year, which were a huge challenge. And thankfully the rest of the season, we don't have to do that anymore. But with parts shortages, tire shortages, everything else, racing that much in a short period of time was definitely a challenge for everybody.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
All right. So let's turn our attention to the depth of talent in the Trans Am series, because we kind of alluded to it earlier on. You got a lot of these young kids. You got like the Connor Ziliches that are coming out of the MX5 Cup Series. You got a lot of these kids that are under contract to some of these NASCAR teams like Gibbs and some of these other big time teams. And they're 14, 15, 16 years old. And you got to believe if they've got that kind of tie-in with a NASCAR team, there's a manufacturer behind it. So there's some definite money being thrown at these kids thinking that they're going to make that move at some point here. So talk at first a little bit, Thomas, if you would, about the depth of talent, because I know there's guys like you, there's Rafa, you got Skeen showing up occasionally, right? And so there's a lot of you sports car guys, and then like a lot of these young kids are kind of a mix of sports car guys and NASCAR hopefuls. So talk a little bit about the strength and the depth of talent in that massive TA2 field that you guys have week in and week out.
It's pushed the field. The whole field is faster. Every race we've done this year, we've been faster than last year's pole. At every race, every track we've been to. I think at Road America, this last race that we had, I qualified 5th, and the top 6 were under the track record from the previous year, and I was only 0.3 off the pole. And it's wild to think that, and I think at Laguna, I missed the pole by 0.2 and I was 8th on the grid.
Jeez,
I mean,
that is nuts.
It's so close. It's so competitive. And it's so awesome because it wasn't really that competitive when I started with Trans Am. There was maybe, we had big field sizes, but there was maybe, 4 or 5 guys that really could win. And now you're looking at the top 10, the top 15 all really have a legitimate shot at doing well week in, week out. And there's no resting anymore. So all the way through, and our work starts at practice. So our practice time sets the grid order for qualifying. We have a 2-group qualifying format, like Kevin, you alluded to, that field size on a short racetrack. You got to do something about it. So we've got a fast group and a slow group for qualifying. So in order to make sure you're in the right group, you got to bring your A game to the practice session. And sometimes that one practice session is all we get. And so in a very short period of time, you got to put a lap in and make sure that you're in the right group so that you have a chance at the pole. And it's we really, at no point during the weekend can we rest on our laurels. We're pushing ourselves and the equipment and the drivers hard all the time. But I'll tell you, man, I love it. It's so cool. It's some of the best racing I've ever done. It's really cool to race with these kids too. Connor and Brent Cruz is the other one. Brent Cruz won the last race at Road America. He and I have run the same chassis, and so we've been comparing notes all season long and helping each other get quicker. And sometimes I forget how young that kid is. Honestly, sometimes I talk to him about how his car is behaving, and I feel like I'm talking to a professional that's been in the sport 10 years. It's kind of wild how up to speed these guys are and how mature and well prepared they are. And that all comes down to the support, right? Like you said, they're with these NASCAR programs already. And it just makes me jealous. I wish I had that at that age, but I'm happy for them. It's super cool.
Wow. And to your point, you're 100% right. I mean, what do they always say in just about any professional level sports, whether it's racing or a stick and ball sport? It's like competition makes you better no matter, I
Yes.
mean, all the way through the field. So who, and I know this is kind of a nebulous question, but you got, I think, what, 4 races left in the season after counting Nashville. I know you're neck and neck with Rafa right now in the championship, but you got a lot of guys right there. You got Zilic, you got Cruz, you got God knows how many other. I mean, I looked at the point standings. I mean, if you looked at everybody that competed in a race and scored a point, there's like 60 guys listed in the points for TA2 this year. It's nuts. Who
Yeah.
would you say is the guy that you're the most concerned about in for the rest of the season?
Brent Cruz is having the same trajectory that I am in terms of his season, but he's coming at it from a different angle. He's had a little bit more luck with the equipment side, but he's been rougher around the edges. So he hasn't finished races early on because he's been either crashed out or kind of made a mistake here or there. But he's getting there right with me. And the 2 races I won back to back, Lime Rock and Mid Ohio, he was right there on my heels. And at Road America, he and I were battling for the lead for most of the race. And I don't see him having any weaknesses right now. And he's never been to most of these racetracks, and he's already driving at this level. So I don't really think he's going to have any weaknesses moving forward. He's never done a street course race before, but frankly, I don't think that's going to matter. I think this kid's going to be on pace. I wouldn't sleep on Connor Zilic. I think that kid's got a boatload of talent. And if he's got a good race car, he's going to be right in the mix. But at the end of the day, Rafa's the defending champion. He's in arguably the best supported race car in the field, and he's going to be really strong too. So really, those 3 guys are the guys that I'm looking at as kind of the ones to watch out for. Mike Skeen is always going to be there. He's not going to be in every race, but he's going to be there when he's there. So,
Right.
And he's Rafa's teammate. So we'll see. There could be some.
There could be a little
of that. Yeah, there could be some teammate action there towards the end of the year. I don't know.
little strategery.
There could be, although Mike's a racer. He wants to win if he can. So
Yeah.
we'll see if he plays that game or not. But anything's possible, and I'm just looking forward to it. I can't wait to get to Nashville. It's going to be so much fun.
I know. I'm excited to see you run down there. And for those of you 7th year over fans that don't already know, both the James Bond of podcasting, my co-host, Mr. John McGrath, and I will be at the Nashville Grand Prix for the Trans Am and IndyCar weekend. And we were going to get to talk with the aforementioned Rafa and Cruz and Zilic and our good friend, Mr. Thomas Merrill here. Hopefully we'll catch him on a good day where he's put it on pole and he's walked away from the field. But so Thomas, where does Trans Am stand for you post the 22 season? Is this something you want to continue to run, whether or not you win the championship, or is it just kind of, whatever opportunities and with money and sponsorships factored in, notwithstanding, or is that you got your eye on something else already for 23?
Man, I would love to be able to say that I could choose my own destiny. But the way that I approach my driving career is beggars can't be choosers. And to your point, yes, I would love to stay in Trans Am. I'd be more than happy to continue racing TA2 as long as possible. But any opportunity that comes up, I give it a fair look. And if I have other opportunities to do other things, like LeMans or like IMSA or like anything like that, I would jump all over it. I'd love to get in a NASCAR at some point. I've worked hard in the past on trying to find a ride there, but that's so tough. It's so competitive to get in the right cars in that world. And
you're not a 14-year-old Brent Cruz either.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's, I mean, you know what I would really love to do is the Chili Bowl. That's another thing.
Hell yes.
Something like that would be really cool. But I don't rule anything out. If any possible opportunity, and anyone who's listening that wants to put me in a race car, the answer is yes, absolutely. Let's do it.
Rock on, dude. Rock on. Well done. So speaking of opportunities, you had a pretty phenomenal opportunity this June at the Circuit de la Sarthe, joining the 911 Porsche RSR WeatherTech team with one of my old friends, Mr. Cooper McNeil, and wound up finishing, actually, after leading a good bit of the night in GTE AM, winds up P2 on the podium. Congrats, man. How did that whole deal even materialize?
That's so crazy.
It's nuts to me. And I'm like, I'm like, holy shit. And I'm not even going to show this picture in the promos for the show, but I sent Thomas a rather incriminating picture from years ago when we were hanging out in a hotel room. And I'm like, I said to him in a text, I'm like, holy shit, dude, if anybody would have told me that you'd go from this to P2 at Le Mans, I'd have said, what are you smoking? But dude, massive congrats. That was a mega drive. Talk about how that whole thing materialized for this year's 24 Hours of Le Mans.
It's a cool story, and actually, I have to give Mike Skeen the credit for it because he was at the Long Beach Grand Prix earlier this year, and I get a text from him randomly saying, "Hey, I heard that WeatherTech's looking for a driver for Le Mans that's got your driver rating," and I was like, "Oh, really?" And I didn't know anything about the team or what the program was or anything like that, but I did a little bit of light research. I learned that WeatherTech was teaming with Proton for Le Mans. So I just started beating the pavement and reaching out to anyone that I knew that could possibly have a connection with this team. Ended up, my friend Matt Bell knew the team owner and connected me to him directly. And then I just hammered the guy. I kind of felt bad about it, but over the course of the next couple of months, I was just hammering him saying, "Hey, give me an opportunity. Let's see what we can do here." And a couple of months later, he goes, "Yep, you're on the list. We're gonna do a driver shootout." And we'll follow up with you with more details. And then 3 weeks goes by, and I'm just nervous as hell. And then I get a WhatsApp message from him that says, "Okay, I need you to be at Aragon in Spain next Thursday." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, we're doing it. Let's do that." I was racing a P3 car at Mid Ohio that previous weekend, and I had an SRO race in a GT4 car the weekend after. So I basically had to go from Mid Ohio to Spain directly back to Louisiana for the SRO race. And so I was in the span of 4 days, I was up for a full 24 hours, going to Spain, doing the test, and then coming back again.
Wow.
It was insane. And I'd never been to Spain either. So I'm flying to Barcelona for the first time, and drive out to Aragon, which is a wonderful racetrack out in the middle of the Spanish countryside. And what had happened is Porsche factory had rented the track for like a whole week for 24-hour periods all the way through the week, so they could test with their LMDH car and their RSR as much as they wanted. Wow. At one point, the night before the test, I get up to pee and I could hear the LMDH car running around the track, which I thought was kind of neat. But yeah, so we show up, there's 4 drivers that they chose. And they said, "Okay, we're going to give each of you 20 laps, 10 laps on old tires, 10 laps on new tires. And we'll see who's worthy. We're going to pick the fastest one." And so I kind of just did what I always do. I just said, "All right, let me just have fun with this and see where we end up." And fortunately, I did a good enough job that they decided to ask me to join them for Le Mans, which was just awesome. So, and at that point, it was only 2.5 weeks to the race itself. So then it was, a crazy amount of logistics to figure out, okay, how do we get there? What do we need to do? What's the prep? They make you take a simulator test now. I don't know if you guys know this about Le Mans, where they actually put you on a simulator and run you through all these different scenarios on how the logistics of the race work, how the slow zones work, how the safety cars work, how it can be raining on one side of the track and dry on another. It's like a 4-hour test they make you take on a simulator. Wow. And so I had to fly out a couple days early to Paris, where there was this really cool simulator. Like, it looked like the kind of simulator you'd see in a Formula One team on all these actuators in this room. And
sure, they're like the big rig, the whole deal. Yeah.
Yeah. The funniest part about it was they gave me a warm-up session before they turned the motion on. And as soon as they did, it made me sick and I had to have them turn it off. So I didn't get to play with the coolest part of the simulator, which was the motion aspect, but
didn't feel the brake dive and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
like I was on yellow, but yeah, it didn't
what
work.
What would have happened had you not passed the test? Did they give you, can you take it a number of times, or you use like, if you don't get it the first time, you're done, you're out. They got to go to plan B.
All I could think was, dude, just don't fail this test. So right. I was manically, so Jason Hart's a buddy of mine, and he was doing it for the first time as well with the GMW Ferrari team. And he and I were commiserating pre-Le Mans on, okay, what are we, what's our prep? And he said he was going through the rule book and just memorizing as much of it as he could, making flashcards and doing everything he could to prepare for this test, because he was in the same boat I was. Like, oh God, if we don't pass this test, we're screwed. So yeah, I felt like I was back in college and cramming for the exam, just to make sure I didn't screw anything up.
Yeah. So I got to ask Thomas, with an opportunity, like somebody like myself who's a fan and just likes, closest I'll ever get to driving on Le Mans is Gran Turismo 7. So I've sort of, lamented the fact that that's as far as I'm going to get. But when you did get in the car and the first time you were getting out from the pits and you were there,
Yes.
what was going through your mind?
I just do a good job.
Yeah.
Don't step on your dick.
Exactly. Right? Yeah.
Don't get caught up in the moment, sort of thing.
Yeah. You know what it reminded me of? So when I was a kid, I would catch myself, and I don't know why I had the presence of mind at 10 years old to recognize that this was a problem, but going down the front straightaway at my local go-kart track, I was tracking the fence line to see where my dad was watching from. And it occurred to me one day, that's probably not great. I need to focus on the racetrack and focus on doing a better job. So what I did was I took a piece of duct tape, a full piece of duct tape, and put it on, kind of like how Gilles de Ferran always had on his visor strip, where it was like super, or Nigel Mansell, how it was always super thick.
Super thick,
so
yeah.
It was just a sliver to look out of the visor. And that basically meant that all I could see was the racetrack, and that kept me focused, and it actually helped in that early phase of my career. And I took that forward to Le Mans. The last thing I was looking at was the Dunlop Bridge coming out of the pit lane. I was looking at the apexes, the track outs, the braking markers.
Yep.
I wasn't looking at the fence line that on the test day was lined with fans, which blew my mind.
Sure.
I was trying not to look at any of that stuff, because I just do the job you're here to do. Just focus on not screwing up. It's really effectively the mentality. And to that end, I'm worried that I almost missed out on some experiences because I was so focused on doing it, but I couldn't see any other way. I mean, the position I was in, it's like, you have to do a good job.
Sure. So when you're settling in and you're doing your laps, you're on your stint of the race, the announcers will always tell us, oh, well, now that driver, he's on the Mulsanne straight, now he can relax a little bit. Is that true? Is it? Because to me, I was thinking to myself, how could you possibly relax in this sort of situation? Well, yes, I understand it. You're going straight. There's really not a whole lot going on unless somebody's passing you or you're passing somebody else. And you're just thinking about the chicanes coming up. But honestly, though, for those of us who don't know, how much is there ever relaxing during that section of the course?
It's a good question, and it depends. I think after a while, yeah, you can relax. But your first few sessions on the racetrack, a 4-minute lap goes by pretty quick. Yeah, you're super focused the entire time and taking in as much information as possible. But come race time, when I'm doing my double stints and I'm out there in the middle of the night, kind of driving through, there is a period of time to relax. And that was the one of the things that stuck out to me the most about that racetrack is it wasn't the physical demand that I anticipated. I found it actually quite easy to do an hour in the car because you had so much rest time on the straightaways. But your rest period doesn't come to you by itself. You have to actually relax in the car, and you have to tell yourself to, okay, relax, let your muscles settle down, loosen your grip on the wheel, check any settings or look at your fuel number, anything that helps you just kind of breathe. Exactly. Take a drink, whatever you need to do to
have a cigarette, whatever, just chill out.
Yeah. Well, you've got time to do it. But that was the funny part about the steering wheel. There was all these different alphanumeric codes that you needed to put in based on what the engineers wanted to change in the car. And even in the 20-page PDF they sent me, they didn't clarify what those alphanumeric codes were doing. It was just, here's how you input this. You don't need to worry about what you're actually doing. You just have to know when they tell you to go to alpha 57 and hit acknowledge that you can do that. And so thankfully the straightaways were long enough where you could actually have time to do the math,
think about it
on the steering wheel. Yeah. And push all the buttons before the next brake zone.
Nice.
Wow.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was actually last night, like I said, the closest I'll get is Gran Turismo 7. I was actually in the RSR Porsche last night going around a 30-minute endurance race in that car on Le Mans on the Sarth. So yeah.
That's awesome. How did it go?
I won.
There you go. Well done.
Thank you.
Because I wasn't in the race.
Oh, there we go. Look, I get it. You're professionals. I get it. I'm just the plebeian over here with my little box.
I love you, buddy.
A W is a W. You got to take it.
Yeah,
that's right. Hey, so I've been thinking about this since you and I've been talking over the last couple of weeks about coming on, and of course with your massive success there at Le Mans. So like a lot of us, and you are right in the thick of it now. You've been toiling for rides. You've been making the relationships, Richard Deal and all this stuff. And then you're spending so much time in the Trans Am. I know you drive some P3 stuff. I mean, almost anything you can get your hands on. But I got to believe that the amount of time that you spent in basically a NASCAR road race car, i.e. the Trans Am car, and then and whatever level of the team is, and I don't know the level of the team that you're at. Obviously, it's pretty good because you're, co-lead for the championship. But when you make a move from that car in that environment with that team on this type of road racing circuit in the United States, and then you move on to one of the top world endurance championship racing teams in Proton, getting a 20-page PDF that just outlines the functions of the fucking steering wheel, how much, if any, of a culture shock was that for you, moving from what you're used to that Proton deal and the level of that program in the grand scheme of things?
Well, I'm flying to Europe to do it. So I think there was so much different that it was almost easier because everything's different. So, okay, fine, hit the reset button and start from zero again. But I will say I did have a little bit of a leg up with that transition, because last year I ran the LMP2 car in IMSA with Win Autosport and had that same kind of dynamic as far as the level of technology and the size and scope of the team. And at one point, interestingly enough, I got to drive both of those cars in the same day. We were testing at Watkins Glen in the LMP2 car, and my Trans Am team had rented my car to a young NASCAR driver for seat time at Watkins Glen. And sure enough, they had an issue with the car, and they're like, "Thomas, we need you to jump in and make sure that it's behaving the way it should." And so I literally drove an LMP2 car and a Trans Am TA2 car back to back, and it was kind of mind blowing, particularly at Watkins Glen, where the LMP2 car is like a F-16 fighter jet. But fortunately I had experience with that transition before. And I find the more that I can drive different things, the better I get at driving different things. And that also comes from Ron Sutton. So one of the cool things that he did with us early in our careers was he sent us to Corey Kruseman's sprint car school down in Ventura to drive his midget and 360 sprint car. And I still get goosebumps thinking about going full throttle in that sprint car for the first time, even though I shouldn't have. I just got wheel spin all the way down the straightaway, but it was still satisfying to go full throttle in a sprint car for the first time. And it really kind of cemented the value in that variety of seat time and understanding how to make any car fast and do so in a short period of time. And all the people that ask me for advice, that's the advice that I give them is drive as many different things as you can. And that's going to make you the most well-rounded driver and enable you to go from whatever to whatever and do it well. So I've just done that my whole career. So in a way, that transition at LeMans was maybe not as difficult as it might seem.
That's got to also help your career, though, at the same time, just because these other teams, bigger, better, whoever teams, will look at you and say, hey, Thomas really is able to adapt to these different cars, and look how well he does in these different series, going from, basically like what Kevin said, a NASCAR for the road course being the Trans Am car, and then being able to get into something like the WeatherTech Porsche, the RSR. It shows these other teams for you. It opens up your resume even further.
I hope so. I mean, I'm just trying to emulate my heroes, the Mario Andretti's of the day and the AJ Foyt's of the day. They could jump in any race car and go win a race on any given day. And that's just all I ever wanted to be, So,
well, dude, as you're saying that, and I say this a lot when I'm teaching, wherever it is I'm teaching, whoever it is I'm teaching, and you may have even heard me say this, Thomas, but it's like, to me, part of what made the greats of the previous generations, the Marios, the AJs, the Rutherfords, the Unsers, what made those guys great is that they literally did drive everything. They drove sprint cars and dirt cars and midgets and sports cars and stock cars and everything. They drove everything they could get their hands on, and they learned a little bit from each one of them and added that to their own kind of little skill set and toolkit. And that's, as they got into better, newer, later equipment, different equipment, they were better equipped to adapt, like you've been able to do as you've moved, from car to car. So I think that's a really great point, Thomas.
Totally. And the NASCAR development programs are wise to that. Brent Cruz is good because when he's not running a Trans Am car, he's running a 410 sprint car on a dirt track somewhere. And then he jumps in a late model and does that. And they keep him busy, but they keep him busy in a variety of cars, which I'm a big believer in. And that's the only shame of like the European ladder system and how that works is, it's very linear, and there's not a lot of deviation from that. And it's wild to think about the amount of drivers now, particularly factory drivers, that have never driven an H pattern vehicle in their entire lives.
I know, isn't that nuts?
Yeah, it's all flappy paddle stuff. Yeah,
in that way, and yeah. I think it was Jack Hawksworth. He jumped in the Joe Gibbs Xfinity car at Mid Ohio 2 years ago, I think it was, and he said it was the first H pattern car he's ever raced.
Oh my God,
which is wild to think about, right?
Well,
but
I think that might be a product of just these programs now, like you talk about the European system, how, they go from karting to Formula 2000 or Formula 3 or from 2 and then 1 if they get that far. I think that has to do with the business aspect of it, that they start pigeonholing these kids and these younger drivers into this one direction, and all they're viewed as a business asset, and they have to continue that pathway, as you spoke of. The linear line of driver has to go this way because this is what they expect of you.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point of view of it anyway.
Yeah, certainly. But I definitely like what I see with the development programs. Like Connor Zilisch is a great example. He's running MX5 Cup and Trans Am back to back simultaneously.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best things he could be doing right now.
Right. Yeah, you're 100% right about that, Thomas. So kind of turning back to Le Mans for just a moment, with the fantastic result you guys had, what was the fallout within the team and those guys afterwards? Are like, oh my God, Thomas, we want you back. We want you to do more. What's the fallout? What's the benefit for Thomas Merrill beyond being able to say I finished on the podium at Le Mans in my first try, by the way?
Yeah, well, I still, you say that out loud and it still doesn't seem real. 3 days ago, I finally got my trophy. And the funny thing at Le Mans, you can't leave with your trophy until the car passes tech. So I had to leave the trophy at the racetrack, and then the team mailed it to me, and I just got it like 3 days ago.
That's
so I was looking at it like, wow, this is real. It happened. But yeah, you're right. My phone's ringing a lot more than it was before. And the only drawback is I'm pretty busy with Trans Am racing and what I'm doing here domestically. So unfortunately, I've had to turn down a few offers, but the offers are coming in, which is great. And I want to just continue riding that wave and trying to push that momentum forward. And I'd love to go back to Europe and race some more. And there could be some endurance racing in Europe coming up for me towards the end of the year. Still working on hammering out those details. And I mean, you guys know there's no guarantees in this sport. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm pushing as hard as I can to make it happen, and not, the last thing I want to do is rest on those laurels, right? I want to keep going, and, making it to Le Mans was a career goal of mine. So now winning Le Mans is my career goal. Let's go back and let's try to win that thing.
Hell yeah. With that kind of result right out of the gate, of course you'd want to go back and have that thrill, or that shot at that thrill. But man, and to your credit, Thomas, you've been pushing every button you can think of to push. I mean, the success that you've earned and the success that's starting to come your way. And I kind of jokingly said at the top of the show, you're like the worst kept secret in motorsports now, especially after that Le Mans finish. But that's kudos to you, man, because you've earned that and you've gotten that done. So keep up that fantastic work, man. I can't wish you well enough in what's coming down the pike for you. But to the seventh year over Rev fans, just so Thomas just talked about how, the phone calls are coming more regularly, and he's busy with Trans Am stuff and testing and doing all these kinds of things. I've been talking with Thomas via text here for literally the last month or so, trying to get this interview scheduled, and he's so damn busy.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. Yeah.
No, I'm not. Yeah. I'm not complaining. I'm just telling the listeners of the show that that's how busy this guy is. He's probably the busiest guy I know in motorsports right now, making all of this shit happen. So again, massive kudos to you on that, Thomas. Congratulations. I hope it continues for you, man. I'm glad that you were able to carve out a little bit of time for our little show. But
no, it's my pleasure. It's great to be here. I've wanted to get on this show for a while, so thanks for having me, man. This is awesome.
I'm going to cut that piece out as a little PSA for the show. Thomas Merrill saying he's wanted to be on the show for a long time. You've heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. So, all right, Thomas, I gotta ask a little bit on the more personal side, because I know, like we said, you've driven a lot of things, a lot of different series. And we kind of talked about, in the Trans Am series, the guys that you've had to watch out for, or that you're really kind of paying most attention to as you kind of go through this home stretch here in the TA2 series championship. But over the years, I don't know if it was karting, F2000s, whatever it was, anybody that was the biggest ass wipe to you on the racetrack that you just wanted to like get into it with and just set them straight or put them in the wall or take them out?
We're getting into it. I like it.
Hell yes. This is seventh. This is what we do on the 7th Gear Over F show, dude.
Well, if anybody, if anybody listening has been a consistent Trans Am fan, then they probably remember back in 2019 there was a big incident in Virginia towards the end of the season between myself and another driver, it was a culmination of a relationship that had developed over time, and yeah, I always try to avoid that drama and stay out of it, but sometimes people are asking for it, and I don't like to be the one, given the business, but in that context, it was, the situation called for it. But yeah, there's been a few. I almost feel embarrassed to say anybody's name because I don't want to put anybody on blast. But if anyone wants to find out who that was, just research 2019 VIR. You'll figure it out pretty quick.
Nicely done. That'll also be part of the show promo. Thank you very much.
I'm Googling this right now.
Exactly. Google is our friend. All right. So along those same lines, Thomas, you've been in enough endurance races where you've had to share the seat with somebody else, like Cooper and was it Andauer was your other co-driver at LeMans?
Julian Andlauer, yes.
Andlauer, yes.
Yeah.
So have you ever felt the need or have done it where just to get a little like a kind of a one-up on your teammate that's sharing the same car with you, that maybe you just kind of pissed in the seat and just left it there for him just to kind of psychologically
this is like his favorite question.
I love this question.
He loves it. It's amazing.
Well,
I know some guys have and some guys haven't.
I've only peed in the seat once, and it wasn't on purpose. I was a little overhydrated. The first pro race I ever did.
A little extended caution, perhaps.
Yeah, I had a little bit too much Pedialyte before the start of the race, but fortunately, I was the second driver in the car, so there wasn't. I felt bad for the crew afterwards, but I will say, and we got a good relationship now, but Jeff Westphal and I came up at about the same time, and we're very competitive. The year that I was Rookie of the Year in Pacific F2000, he's the guy that I beat out for that title, and he's gone on to have tons of success, and he's super quick. He's got I think he still has a lap record at the Nürburgring 24-hour when he put that Glickenhaus thing on pole. That was awesome.
That's right.
Yeah. The first time I did the Daytona 24-hour, we were teammates and we were the two fast guys in the car. And so there was that adversarial, like, all right, who's going to be the
who's going to be the number one?
Yeah. And I remember in the post-race press release, our press person gave him credit for the fast lap of the race. And I could not get in contact with that person fast enough to say, no, that was my lap.
Yeah.
I wanted to make that clear because we didn't have a great result, but I wanted to get at least get that,
Suddenly that guy has 9 missed calls, 14 texts.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was pretty adamant to make sure to correct the record, but Jeff and I were competitors in the same team, but I almost kind of enjoyed that because it really pushed both of us to be better. But I've never peed on anybody, so there's that. Sorry, Kevin, I can't I don't know that for you.
That's the snippet he's now going to cut out. Thomas has never peed on anybody. Just wanted to point that out.
Not in the seat, just not on anybody. All right, fair enough.
Paid or otherwise.
I can work with that. So you mentioned to Thomas, guys like Mario, guys that you looked up to, and the whole idea of driving all kinds of different things. So you've obviously had a pretty long career to this point, which is not even a fraction of the way through, God willing. But as you look back on all the guys that have influenced your career, whether you've met them or raced with them or not, who would you probably put at the top of your personal list as like the guys that you think the highest of for whatever reason, whether it's Trans Am, karting, Formula One, to World Endurance Sports Cars, whatever?
There's a lot of people that I have a lot of respect for. Tristan Nunez was on our team at Win Autosport in the LMP2 car, and he was probably the best teammate that I've ever had. And what was funny about that is when Tristan was young and starting his career, I met him at Skip Barber when he came through and was beginning his career. And then fast forward, 10, 15 years, whatever it was, And now I'm on an LMP2 team with him, and he's showing me the way around. But to his credit, he was nothing but super helpful and supportive. And he was like, we have a funny sport. It's very individual, but in an endurance scenario, we all kind of share the same end result. But at the same time, we all have our own individual performances that we're focusing on. But when I was teammates with Tristan, it was the first time I felt like I was on a baseball team or a football team or on a team with somebody where we were both working towards the same goal, and really super cohesive. And he was really helpful, and also just wicked fast. I mean, he's had a rough year with the Action Express program and the way that's all gone, but I'm happy to see him back in the LMP2 car. And I know that kid's got a ton of speed, and he's going to be right back in the thick of it before long. But he was an awesome teammate. And Julian Anlauer, the Porsche factory driver we had in the WeatherTech car, unbelievably quick. The kid's got the track record in the RSR at LeMans in GTM, and he's 22 years old. He drives for Porsche factory. He's already run Le Mans 5 times. He's won it once. He lives in Dubai. He's single. Can you imagine a better life? I mean, the guy.
Wow.
But he's totally down to earth. He was totally welcoming. He was very helpful with teaching me about how to drive the RSR quick. He's got all this going for him, but he had all the time in the world to sit down with me and go over data and video and show me anything that I needed. And that was massively helpful. And he was just a really, really good teammate driver, kind of across the board. Really good experience with him and Tristan. And I could talk to you about drivers I have respect for all day long. Mike Skeen, I love racing with Mike Skeen. He's one of the few drivers in Trans Am that I know I can go side by side with and not have to worry about getting punted off the racetrack. So,
okay. So what about the drivers you don't have respect for?
Everybody else.
No, all right. That's a very safe answer. And I get it. All right. I'll let you have that one.
That's not fully true. There's a lot of quality guys in that series, but there's definitely a few at the sharp end that, if you're side by side, something's coming, but Mike's not one of those guys. So a lot of respect for him.
Well, and you made a really good point too, Thomas, because I've been down that road too, where it's like, you talked about Tristan and Anlauer and how great of a teammate they were. And that doesn't always happen. A lot of times, because it's a dog eat dog cutthroat world out there, they're talking shit behind your back. They're trying to undermine you. They're not sharing information. They're not working together as they should for the betterment of the whole team, because it's all, every man for themselves kind of thing. So that's a really good point that you brought up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's not many guys like that, but I've been fortunate enough to come across a lot of those. JCD, I don't know if you guys know about JCD, John Capistro Dubets. He's having a resurgence of his career right now as well. And he's been a buddy for a long time, and we did some races together, and he's pretty awesome. He just put the RS1 Porsche on pole at Lime Rock for the Michelin Pilot Cup race, and super quick guy. And another guy I'd put in that category, just solid dude, great teammate, always supportive, and one of the guys that you would root for even if you're racing against him. I've been fortunate to be around a lot of good people.
Nice. Well, that's
yourselves included, by the way.
I'm sorry. Well, who's that?
Yourselves included. You.
Well, I appreciate that, dude. That's very nice. I wasn't quite sure I heard what I thought you said. So I was like, wait, what? But very kind of you to say.
Here we go. The inflation of the race car driver's ego.
Very kindly done. I will be sure to compensate you for that when I see you in Nashville. That nice little plug there. But all right, gang. So I know you're on your constant travel schedule here. You just got up to Elkhart Lake to do some testing here up at my old home racetrack, Road America. And I know you're probably jonesing to get some food here with the guys here pretty soon. But let's say as we get to that checkered flag point, John, is there anything else that you'd like to talk with Thomas about before we let him go get some food and some sleep?
I guess for me, it would just be, this is something I always ask of any of the professional drivers we have. Is there a particular kind of car that you gravitate toward? Is there maybe a make or model, or maybe more a specific style of car? What sort of thing do you enjoy the most?
The next one, whatever it is.
That's the Carroll Shelby answer. Good job. I like it.
I am so fortunate to do what I do that whatever's coming next, bring it on. I love it.
Right on.
Very nice, Thomas. So I know you kind of alluded to some possibilities later this year, some more endurance racing stuff, possibly in Europe. But beyond the Trans Am Championship, what else you got on? What else you got on the books so far for the rest of the year that you can talk about?
Well, I'm hoping to add some endurance races to the end of the season here. I think there's a couple big races coming up that might have some opportunities. Nothing I can talk about yet in specifics, but I'm hoping endurance sports car stuff. That's kind of the area that I'm looking at for adding some races. So we'll see what happens, and I hope to continue in that world for next year. But yeah, never can tell until the ink's on the paper, so to speak. But yeah, but honestly, for the time being, I'm just so focused on this Trans Am Championship. Myself and Mike Cope Racing have wanted to win a championship for a long time, and we've been thereabouts for a long time. So I'm pretty supremely focused on sealing the deal here, because the crew has earned it, man. They've gone through COVID, they've gone through all this different stuff, and yeah, if I can give them a championship, that'd be the least I could do. So yeah, that's my focus.
Right on. Right on, dude. Well, again, for both John and I, man, well done on the success from this season. You got the couple wins, you're co-leader in points in TA2 on the podium at LeMans. I think I can speak for John when I say we are really pulling for you to pull off that TA2 championship this year, dude.
Absolutely.
And we will talk. Yep. We will talk more when we get to Nashville. But is there anything else that you would like to discuss, Thomas, before we let you go?
Good question. Gosh, we've covered a lot. We've just spent too much time talking about me. I never like talking about myself too much.
Well, this is why we have you on the show, dude. This is all about you, man.
You know what? I'd love to ask you guys, because you guys are motorsports aficionados. What do you think about paved runoff and track limits in motorsports these days?
John, you want to give your opinion first? I have an opinion on that.
I mean, my thought is, if you have two guys racing for a win, as long as they're not like killing each other and like going like completely off road, my thought is let them race. Especially like what we saw at Spielberg with the Austrian Grand Prix. It's like every 5 minutes was up, track limit warning, track limit warning, track limit. Stop. Let these guys do what they're paid to do and what I'm here to watch them to do. And the reason why I pay Formula One the money I do to watch these races, to watch them race, and not because of, oh, you touched a curb, we're going to warn you again. That's my personal thought.
And in terms of, paved runoff versus gravel runoff, I'm of the opinion that you pave it. In my opinion, just because I think a lot of times the gravel, and I understand there's an argument both ways. I completely get there's an argument both ways. I just feel like, how they up in Mossport, that runoff there in turn 2 used to be grass, right? And now it's been paved for a decade now, and it gives you a little bit more room to scrub off some speed if you get it wrong before you hit the wall, versus accelerating on grass that is more likely than not going to be wet up in Canada, regardless of when you run. I just feel like a lot of times the gravel is going to trip the car, and then you wind up seeing, potentially stuff like what happened with the Alfa Romeo at Silverstone there, where it can catch, and trip the car if it gets in at just that odd angle. So, and if you, in terms of the track limit deal, if you really want to be a hard ass about track limits, put the fucking sausage curbs out there. Make them, if they're, if you want to go out there, then, and you're really trying to enforce it, rather than take away your fast lap, like they did to, who was it, Ricardo this last week in Formula One, where he wound up going out of the top 6 in like 15th or 12th for starting. But I tend to be, and I'm not, married to this opinion long term, but I'm of the opinion, at least at the moment, that I would kind of leaning towards more paved runoff area.
Interesting thing that I've seen from my experience lately relative to paved runoff is the mutual respect, or the lack thereof, from one competitor to the next.
Yeah. And
it makes me think of when I did the Daytona 24 for the first time. Vic Elford was the Grand Marshal, and he gave a speech at the drivers' meeting, which was awesome. I mean, Vic's just a badass, right? He's a super cool guy, and he talked about the differences between his era and our era in terms of how comfortable it was, and he was kind of basically just calling everybody pussies in the room, like, in my day, yada yada yada. We only had 2 drivers. We didn't have all these lights and all this other stuff. But the point of his rant was, and we had respect for one another, because if we did run that guy off the road, we could kill him. And that was real. And so that forced a lot of respect amongst the competitors, and it created a gentlemanly environment. And so his point was to communicate to us, try to be gentlemen in addition to professionals on the racetrack. And without the consequence, I've seen the respect and the gentlemanliness kind of go away. And it's disappointing. Like, how many times have you seen in Formula One, a guy is side by side with another guy, and maybe they're not perfectly wheel to wheel, but the guy on the inside just runs them straight to the runoff.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be talking about when Lewis Hamilton ran off Max Verstappen off at Silverstone, would you? Because he totally missed that apex amazingly.
He sure did. Yeah. And if he had to think in the back of his head, man, shoot, if I miss this apex and I run into Max, and if I could kill him, maybe he wouldn't have entered the corner with that level of commitment. Right.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with your point, Kevin, as far as, like, given that from a safety standpoint, I think it's important, but I'd love to find a way to make it, to bring the respect back, because that's the one thing that I've noticed has gone by the wayside. And you see it a little bit at NASCAR, kind of all across the board. If there isn't a consequence, there's less respect. And I don't know what the solution is for it, but I'd like to see something.
Thomas, do you think maybe there's Thomas, do you think maybe there's a correlation between the amount of, let's say, like the amount of safety that has been such an improvement over the last few years? Do you think some of these guys who are kind of playing with fire a little bit, like we talked about, you think because maybe they're relying too much on the safety factor of these cars now, like with halos and Hans devices and everything else, maybe they're like, well, you know what? It's not as big of a risk as it was, say, maybe even 10 years ago. You think that might be sort of something that's in the back of their mind also, that, a lot of these cars, look at Jean Renews, I'm probably pronouncing his name right. At the Silverstone accident, they had horrific accident, obviously, at Silverstone. He was fine. Totally fine.
Right.
Do you think maybe some of these guys who are lacking that respect is because of the safety has gotten so much better?
I don't think it's a matter of the drivers knowing they're safe and then pushing more because of it, but I think it's the lack of the self-preservation. So it's not necessarily I wouldn't criminalize anybody for intentionally being dangerous, but I would say that a lot of drivers aren't considering things that they may have considered 10, 20 years ago.
Right.
And that goes hand in hand with the respect thing. And the only people that I hear talking about that are the old school guys that remember what it was like to drive a car that could kill you, to drive a car that was inherently dangerous on a track that was dangerous. And that's part of why we love the sport too, is the danger involved. And if we were all, wearing pads and water wings and everything was, if there was no consequence on the racetrack, who would show up to watch it? You know what I mean? So I think it should be a little bit dangerous for more than just the exciting element that it adds to the sport. I think it forces a better level of competition and a more respectful level of competition. Like I said, I don't know that, I don't know that digging up all the runoff is going to make life easy. I don't know.
Right. No,
that's
absolutely right.
That's the one thing I don't hear anybody talking about. And that's always the first thing on my mind when I see stuff happen, is where's the respect that used to be there?
You're right. I mean, and you see so much pushing and shoving going on, and it's everywhere. It's in the Trans Am series, it's in NASCAR, it's in sports car stuff, whether it's, any of the IMSA series, all the way down to club racing. I mean, you see a lot of guys, taking the term elbows out to another level that it doesn't necessarily need to go. Right.
Yeah. And I'm okay with argy-bargy and contact as much as the next guy. But there's an art to the bump and run versus just putting someone in the fence. Right. And I think that's the distinction. Yeah. I
agree. That's a great point, Thomas, and certainly one for all of our Seventh Gear Overhead listeners to ponder as well. And feel free to hit us up on our social media or email us and let us know what you think. And I will be sure to get that input over to Thomas so he and I can have another conversation about that down the road. So, all right, my friend, before we let you go, for those of our Seventh Gear Overhead fans that are now completely enamored, as I said, with the growing legend that is Thomas Merrill, where can they find you? Where can we find Thomas Merrill? Social media, racing series. How do we pay attention to Thomas Merrill and watch him win this championship?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I'm probably the worst self-promoter in the business, but you could probably find me on all the social media outlets, and the Trans Am on CBS. You can also watch the Trans Am races live. They're streamed live on YouTube and Facebook. So if you don't want to wait for the tape delay for CBS, you can find them live on that streaming platform. Please support Trans Am, and please watch it. It's the best racing out there. And every time I get out of a race car in Trans Am, I think about how much fun I had, and I can only imagine how much fun it was to watch. So definitely tune in and check that out. It's going to be a close battle all the way to the end of the season. Hopefully I get better at my self-promotion so I can give you a better answer next time.
It's all right.
Well, if it
have
helps you, I'm already
on.
following you on Instagram. So there you go. Even before this interview, I was already following you.
Perfect.
There we go. All right, brother. Well, I hope one of these days I get to work side by side with you again, like we did, what was it, about a year or so ago out at Road Atlanta. But in the meantime, brother, best of luck. I wish you nothing but the best and hope that championship comes your way in TA2 this year. I will see you along with John next weekend in Nashville, and hopefully we'll be able to celebrate a victory there with you, as well as the rest of the way and all of the rest of your endeavors that you're working on, man. Congratulations. Well deserved. Keep it up, man. Foot to the floor.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be on your show. It's always an honor to talk to you, Kevin. And thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to hopefully doing it again, and we'll see you guys in Nashville.
Absolutely, brother. Sounds good. Well, thanks again for your time, bro. Make sure you get some sleep for tomorrow and get some food in you. And we'll talk to you very, very soon. Thanks.
Thanks.